What's going on, science students? Mr. Walton here. Today we're going to be talking about cells, organelles, and cell functions. Now we're going to start talking about processes that all cells have in common. Then we're going to work through some cell organelles and the functions of those organelles and cells. So let's go ahead and get started. So we already know, okay, this should be kind of common knowledge by now, that cells are the basic unit of life. They're the building block of life. All living things are made up of one or more cells. Now, cells are considered to be open systems. What that means is that things such as like nutrients and waste, other, matter and energy, so things can enter or leave the cell. It's an open system. Not everything can enter or exit, but certain things can. So they are open systems, and they depend on the synchronized work of many components called organelles. All cells carry out the following life processes. So in order for something to be considered alive, it needs to be able to do all 7 of these things here. So a cell needs to be able to take in nutrients. Well, of course it does. It needs to be able to take in nutrients because without new nutrients, the cell would die. The cell needs to be able to move. Hopefully that makes sense. If it's a single-celled organism, that cell needs to be able to move around in its environment. And if it's a cell in your body, it needs to be able to move around in certain ways. In order to carry out certain cell functions. Growth. Not all cells are made or created at the appropriate size, so they need to be able to grow. They need to be able to respond to stimulus outside, so that's, a single-celled organism. If it comes across food, that it wants to take in, it has to be able to respond to that in a different way than it would something it doesn't want to take in. Has to be able to exchange gases such as carbon dioxide and oxygen. Has to be able to remove wastes, just like you. A cell is going to make waste, and if the waste builds up, it becomes toxic for it. And then a cell needs to be able to reproduce. In order for a cell to be living, it needs to be able to perform all of these functions. Which of these functions do viruses not perform? That's an interesting question. So viruses can move, they can grow sometimes, they can respond to stimuli, okay, but they can't reproduce by themselves. They need a host to be able to reproduce. And that's probably the biggest one, okay? They don't really take in nutrients. They don't really remove waste. And they don't really reproduce at all, okay? So they don't take in nutrients. They don't remove waste. And they don't reproduce. Those are the kind of the big 3 that they don't do. So there are 2 major classes of cells. And what we mean by that is we can separate like living organisms basically up into 2 different groups. One is prokaryotic and one is eukaryotic. Now, when I say prokaryotic, I'm stealing this from the Amoeba Sisters, okay? Pro rhymes with no, and it means no membrane-bound organelles. So it's not going to have a nucleus. Eukaryotic stands, so eu rhymes with do, so they do have membrane-bound organelles. That's the biggest difference between them. So prokaryotic or prokaryotes, that's a prokaryotic organism. Prokaryotes don't have a true nucleus. They don't have membrane-bound structures, so their DNA just floats around freely within the cell. They replicate using binary fission. So an example of that is bacteria. Here we go. We've got a bacteria here, and the DNA is just freely floating around in something that we call a nucleoid. It's not membrane bound at all, or bound by a membrane. It's not trapped by a membrane. Eukaryotes do have a true nucleus. DNA is stored within a nuclear membrane. Example, plant and animal cells. So like you, right? You are a eukaryote. You are a eukaryote. So you do have a nucleus. You do have a membrane-bound organelles inside of your cells. So here are membrane-enclosed organelles. You can think of a membrane as just like a layer that wraps around certain structures. So cell organelles are those membrane-bound structures that we were talking about earlier. They perform specific functions inside the cell. You can think of the cell as being similar to a city. There are buildings and groups of people or groups of organizations that are responsible for carrying out tasks that are required for the city to be successful. What are some tasks that the city must do to be successful? Well, I mean, somebody in the city has to be able to organize things. You can't just have a city with certain things doing something and certain things doing other things. There has to be some organization. So there must be something to organize the city. Usually that's City Hall, or that's some sort of a governmental organization, whether you like it or not. Okay. Now, the next thing is that you have to have, a way to be able to transport things around the city, right? Typically, that's like a road or something like that, or a subway system or whatever. So those roads or those subways, they allow the transport of people and goods and services across the city or across the town. What are some other things that need to be done? Well, you need, inside of a city, you need waste removal. So there has to be some sort of like people coming to pick up the trash of organizations and buildings and people and companies. So these waste removal people, they're really critical, because otherwise the waste would build up, and that's not good for anybody, right? So, and also there has to be the intake of goods and services. Now, usually that's, a company would hire a transportation company to like give them the goods that they're going to be selling, but we'll talk about an analogy to that. So these are very similar things. These are very similar things that a cell has to do in order to stay alive. So there needs to be some organization of the cell. So something has to be able to tell what's going on. There has to be some sort of a system for things to be able to move around inside the cell. There has to be able to, you got to be able to get rid of your waste. You don't want waste building up everywhere, and you have to be able to take in goods that you want, like nutrients and things like that. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to pause the video right now and go watch the link for the Amoeba Sisters that's put in the description. And I would like you to go watch that video, because they're much more entertaining than I could possibly ever be. Really, truly, that I could possibly ever be. And then you can unpause the video, and then you can continue on with me. I'm going to put in everything in here. I'm going to fill in this entire chart and put it in the notes so that you can just read the filled in notes and be able to get the information that way. But trust me, go watch that Amoeba Sisters video, and it'll be able to help you quite a bit with your understanding of this. The one thing I am going to go ahead and fill in ahead of time is a lysosome. Now, as we're going to see in a little bit, it's hard to tell the difference in a picture between a lysosome, a vacuole, and a vesicle sometimes, okay? But a lysosome only really truly exists in animal cells. The structure, it's membrane bound, right? It's got a membrane around it. And it contains enzymes. Enzymes are just proteins that like to either build things up or break things down. It contains enzymes that can digest waste material, or it can destroy materials that you want to be destroyed. So everything else in here should be covered by the Amoeba Sisters video. And so what I would like you to do is go ahead, pause the video right now, and go watch that video. Did you actually go watch it? Okay, let's continue. All right, let's continue the video. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to try and label some pictures of some cells and try and see if we can take the information we just saw in the Amoeba Sisters video and be able to apply it to two kind of similar pictures, that kind of thing. So try to label the following objects in the plant and animal cells below. So we got an animal cell here. And we know it looks like an animal cell because there's no real regularity to the outside of the structure. It really, honestly, it just looks like it's a disorganized kind of wavy, wobbly mess, this plasma membrane. So, okay, no problem. Let's go through the numbers. We see this big purpley thing, this big, kind of spherical blob kind of in the center. And so number 1 is the nucleolus. That's a very special part of the nucleus that we're not going to learn about. But number 2 absolutely is the nucleus. Okay? So remember, that is the part of the cell that is giving out the instructions because it contains the DNA, the instructions that make you, or the instructions that make this cell do what it needs to do. Let's keep going. Number 3 is pointing at this little itty bitty little kind of, it's a dot that's on this membrane bound thing that wraps around the nucleus. So that dot there is a ribosome. Ribosome. Oh, there we go. Number 4, here's a picture of number 4 there, but there's also a picture of number 4 there. Okay, number 4, 10, and 12, I'm going to tell you right now, like almost impossible to tell the difference between them. They're just kind of semi-spherical blobs, or in the case of number 10, it's a spherical blob. It's either a vesicle, a vacuole, or it's a lysosome. Number 4, I'm just going to go with vesicle. This thing is like a little packaging unit, right? And it's either sending things out or into the cell. That's all. Number 5, here we go. Number 5 is this membrane-bound organelle that wraps around the nucleus. And it looks like it's got a bunch of little dots on it. So that is the rough endoplasmic reticulum. I'm fine with just ER. That's okay. Number 6 kind of looks like a bunch of pancakes stacked on top of each other. That is the Golgi apparatus. And that is the thing that's packaging these vesicles to send inside and outside the cell. It's the shipping and receiving center of the cell. Number 7 is just part of the cytoskeleton. Don't worry about that. Number 8 looks like it's an extension off of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So it is the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. I almost spelled it smoth. That's how smart Mr. Walton is. Okay, 9. 9 looks like a little kidney bean, but it's got a little wavy thing on the inside. Yeah, you know what it is. That is the powerhouse of the cell. Sorry, that was loud. The powerhouse of the cell. Otherwise known as the mitochondria. Perfect. So, number 10, again, vesicle, vacuole, lysosome. I'm going to go with vacuole because it looks a little bit bigger than the other ones. It looks a little bit bigger than the other two, and it's usually used for storage. So, okay, all right, whatever. Number 11, let's try. Oh, number 11's right here, and it looks like it's pointing at the cytosol, or the cytoplasm. They're kind of the same thing. So it's the jelly-like fluid inside the cell. Good, no problem. 12 is that other one, right? So if this was If this was a vesicle, if that was a vacuole, then this is a lysosome. Lysosome. Perfect. Not perfect. The M is terrible, but whatever. And then 13 is a centriole. It's involved in cell division. Again, you don't have to know it. It's not a part of our program of studies. And then number 14, the outside layer of the cell. Oh, that big old wrappings around the outside layer of the cell. That is the plasma membrane, or the cell membrane. Perfect. Let's continue on. Okay, let's go through this even quicker than that. Here we got a plant cell, and we can tell that it's a plant cell because it's got some regularity to it. Also, it's got 2 layers on the outside. One of these is going to be the cell membrane, and one of these is going to be the cell wall. Okay, no problem. Number 1, nucleus. Technically, it's pointing at the nucleolus. Blame me, that's fine. Number two is pointing at the kind of the spotted thing that's wrapping around it. That's the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Rough endoplasmic reticulum, just remember, is in charge of producing proteins and packaging proteins and shipping them throughout the cell, right? The endoplasmic reticulum is just a series of tubes. Number 3 looks like an extension, so that's the smooth ER, not smoth ER. Number 4 looks like it's just a bare ribosome all by itself. So it's making proteins outside of that endoplasmic reticulum. Number 5 looks like it's pointing at nothing at all, so that's the cytosol or cytoplasm. No problem. 6 looks like it's pointing at one humongous storage facility, and so that would be a vacuole. That's another dead giveaway that that's a plant cell. It's a plant cell because it's got a massive vacuole in the middle. There's going to be one more here in a little bit. 7. What is this? It's got some green coins stacked on top of each other. You got it. A chloroplasta. Number 8, a kidney bean with a little wavy thing inside. Yeah, that is a mitochondria. Number 9 looks like it's pointing at the very outside of the cell. So that's going to be the cell wall. Number 10 looks like it's pointing at the inside of that kind of outside, if that makes sense. That's the cell membrane or the plasma membrane. I like both. And wouldn't you know it, number 11, Mr. Wall didn't put it there, but the Golgi apparatus. So let's try and finish an analogy that we kind of weakly started a little bit earlier. Let's go back to the comparison between cells and cities. Write the name of the organelle that most closely matches the description of a part of a city. So, which organelle do you think would be like the city hall or the mayor? Provides instructions for the cell, controls the operation of the cell. Go ahead and pause the video and try and read through these and see if you can match it up. Like, actually go ahead and pause the video. Pause the video in 5 seconds and see if you can predict what these analogies are going to be. So write down the name of one of our organelles and see if you can match it with the description and see if you're correct. Pause it in 3, 2, 1. Did you pause it? Yeah, good for you. You paused it. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, City Hall Mayor provides instructions for the cell, controls the operation of the cell. Absolutely, that's the nucleus. Absolutely. System of roads or the factory provides a way for things to move around the city, okay, like a system of tubes or something, as well as the manufacturing of materials used by the city. Remember, that's going to be the endoplasmic reticulum. The smooth ER is involved in making lipids and things like that. And then the rough ER is involved in making proteins and polypeptide chains. Workers inside, outside the factory. These workers can be found making materials. Well, those are going to be the ribosomes. They can be found inside and outside the endoplasmic reticulum. Power plant. The power plant provides electrical energy for the city. Okay, well, what's the powerhouse of the cell? Mitochondria. Woo! All right. Water storage facility provides storage for water to be used by the city at any point in time. Well, what's the storage, man? What's going on here? A vacuole. Absolutely. Post office. The post office accepts materials from outside of the city as well as packages materials to be transported outside of the city. I don't know about you, but that sounds like the Golgi apparatus to me. Delivery trucks, they transport materials between the post office and outside of the city. Well, things that move around in packages, they are vesicles. Vacuoles stay relatively still or static, and they're just kind of mainly storage for when you need things the most. Vesicles are moving around. They're almost like vehicles, right? Vehicles, vesicles, they're moving around and they're transporting things inside and outside the cell. Garbage trucks, waste disposal. They gather waste produced in the cell and destroy it or send it outside of the city. Well, man, that's gotta be a lysosome. Now, there's a little bit of an awkward distinction between vesicles and lysosomes, but we're just going to run with it, okay? And then finally, the city border provides a barrier between the city and anything outside of it. It allows some things in and denies entries to others. We're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but that absolutely is the plasma membrane. And to a lesser extent, the cell wall. I mean, I would kind of accept both, but because this is allowing some things in and denying entries to others, we're going to go with the plasma membrane for sure. So let me know if you have any questions. Make sure you please watch that Amoeba Sisters video. It's way better than anything I could ever make. So go ahead and watch it if you have not already, just to solidify your understanding from today. That's it. I'll see you later.